Okay. Uh, so forgive me if I appear a bit jet-lagged. I got in the other day, and I'm really excited to be back in Berlin. It's, I'm not sure, maybe my 5th time here or so I really love it here. So I wanted to talk to you all today about the Hacker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I essentially wanted to start with this image here, if you can make it out. It's an image I've recently really fallen in love with, and I just love it so much because it's sort of this nebulous, kind of almost chaotic-looking place, and it looks like it's very far out in outer space. But what you're actually looking at is an image of our own Milky Way galaxy. And I find it interesting because this is one of the first images of our Milky Way galaxy where we're able to actually really see what it looks like for the first time. This image, I think, was compiled in 2008. And typically when we think about our Milky Way galaxy, we think of something more like this, something that's more kind of a quaint spiral structure, something that's, this kind of system, so to speak. But in reality, our galaxy looks something more like this. And we just haven't really been able to see it until recently, because often when we try and look at our own galaxy, there's so much space dust and space gas in the way that we haven't really been able to see it. So this image was compiled in 2008 thanks to a space telescope called the Spitzer Space Telescope. And the Spitzer Space Telescope is this great telescope that uses infrared, so it's able to peer past all the space dust and space gas, and is able to actually get this lovely image of our galaxy that I was just showing. And the Spitzer Space Telescope gets these images of our galaxy very much from the viewpoint of Earth. And this is because it's on the same orbit as Earth. It orbits around the sun, and it kind of trails behind the Earth and takes these gorgeous images. And so here's just a few more images from the Spitzer Space Telescope, again, of the center of our galaxy and what it really looks like, that you no longer see these spiral structures, but you're able to actually really see kind of the beauty of our own galaxy in a sense. So I'm Ariel Waldman. I live about 27,000 light years away from all of that. Those images are very much at the center of our galaxy, and Earth is about 27,000 light years away from all that. And I find it really interesting to think about sort of the history of what it is that we know about our own galaxy and about our own universe. This is a fascinating image. This was an early sort of depiction of what the shape of our own galaxy was, made in 1785 by William Herschel. And what he did is he used all these star observations that he had made to sort of roughly map out what the shape of our own galaxy looks like. And it's a bit hard to see, but if you see sort of a little bold star in the middle, that's where he thought Earth was, which we now know is a bit off. We're not at the center of our own galaxy, thankfully, because it's a fairly tumultuous, kind of crazy place to be in the center. So we now know we're 27,000 light years away from the center, but I thought this image was actually really fascinating nevertheless. More fascinating, I think, is the fact that it hasn't even been 100 years since we even knew that there was anything more to the universe than our own galaxy. 100 years ago, we thought the Milky Way galaxy was the entire universe, that there were no other galaxies in the universe whatsoever. So it wasn't actually until 1924 that Edwin Hubble, that you can see here, actually spent a lot of time looking at a blob out in the middle of space to determine, is there actually more than just the Milky Way galaxy in our own universe? And this blob is essentially what he spent so much time looking at. At the time, this was referred to as the Andromeda Nebula. So at the time, we thought maybe there's some nebula, maybe there's some junk, but it's kind of like at the edge of our own galaxy, but pretty much the universe is only the Milky Way galaxy. And he spent a lot of time looking at this in the 1920s and was able to determine that actually it's not the Andromeda Nebula, it's the Andromeda Galaxy. And so he was able to determine that there's actually more than just our galaxy in the universe. Of course, now we know there's billions and billions of galaxies. So it's just kind of mind-boggling that it's been less than 100 years that we even knew how large our universe could actually potentially be. Also interesting because the first known depiction of the Andromeda Galaxy was made in the year 964. This depiction was created by a Persian astronomer, and there's a person and a fish. These were sort of Persian and Arabic constellations. But if you can see at the mouth of the fish, there's this tiny little cloud. That's actually the first known depiction of the Andromeda galaxy. So it took about 1,000 years for us to figure out what this blob was, that was its own galaxy, and that there were actually many, many galaxies in our own universe. I also find it interesting because, as many of you here will know, Mac OS X famously shipped with the Andromeda galaxy as its desktop paper. So it's actually something that a lot of us as nerds have also spent a lot of time looking at as well. So to me, when I look at these images of our own galaxy and kind of what it actually looks like, it reminds me of kind of how little it is we know about our own galaxy and about our own universe. And I really like studying things that are really on the verge of what we know and what we don't know. And one of those sort of unknowns of our universe that we're still trying to wrap our heads around are black holes. And black holes are things that typically get a fairly bad reputation. They're known as these incredibly dense places in space-time that sort of pull in everything around them, pull in stars, pull in planets. They're known for gobbling things up, never to be seen again. And while that's kind of true, they're also now known as doing sort of the opposite. While these black holes gobble up everything around them, they oftentimes gobble up more than they can chew. And when they gobble up more than they can chew, they vomit it back out into the universe quite violently. And all this space dust and space gas that these black holes vomit back out into the universe actually might go on to create stars and solar systems and potentially even galaxies. So these black holes, while they're known to be fairly destructive and chaotic forces of nature, they're also kind of these creative forces of nature. They actually help create things as well. And so at the center of our own galaxy, there's a supermassive black hole. And this is a sort of idea that most people have become familiar with, that most galaxies at their center have a supermassive black hole. But what I find also interesting is that in our galaxy alone, there are as many as 100 million black holes, 100 million of them floating around our galaxy. A lot of them are fairly small. They're maybe only 2 miles in diameter or so, but they're still incredibly powerful forces of nature. And so while you can't image a black hole, because even light itself can't escape from its pull, you can image a black hole's vomit. So what you're actually looking at here inside that circle is black hole vomit, which is quite delightful. This is the galaxy M83, not the band M83, but the galaxy. And yeah, inside that circle is a black hole's vomit. So this is an even better image of that process taking place, sort of this black hole kind of gobbling up everything around it, and then vomiting it back out into the universe to go on and create things. And so they sort of sample everything around them, mash it up, and then spit it back out into the universe to go on to create bigger and better things. So to me, when I think of black holes and why I'm so fascinated with them, is because black holes to me are kind of these supermassive hackers of the universe. They're essentially these forces of nature that sort of sample everything around them, mash it up, and then create derivative works that then they send back out into the universe that might go on to create bigger and better things. And it's really about this idea of creating sparks for future things, not really knowing where they're going. That, I guess, fascinates me so much about space exploration and black holes. And it was sort of a spark, in a sense, that led me to where I am today, which is working in space exploration. And prior to 2008, I didn't do anything related to space exploration whatsoever. In 2008, I was watching this great documentary on the Discovery Channel called When We Left Earth. And it was this great documentary about the Apollo program and NASA figuring out how to do space exploration in the 1950s and 1960s. And I found it to be so incredibly inspiring. And I think one of the reasons why I found it to be so inspiring was not because it was a bunch of rocket scientists, but in a sense, these were all actually space hackers. A lot of the people at NASA didn't know anything about space exploration in the early days. The average age at NASA in the 1960s was around 26 or so. And so they were very much figuring out how to explore space and They just didn't know a lot just yet. And so when I was watching this documentary, I just was incredibly inspired. And I said to myself, I don't know anything about space exploration. I want to work at NASA. And so I decided to randomly send someone at NASA an email saying that I was a huge fan of what they were doing. And if they ever needed someone like me who didn't have any formal science background whatsoever, that I was here. Serendipitously, I was able to get a job at NASA from that email, and it completely changed my life. So this is an image of me at NASA. I look fairly calm, but I was actually freaking out because it was just so inspiring to be there. So I wanted to actually share with all of you a clip from this documentary that I found to be so inspiring.
To beat the Soviets, NASA must launch a man into Earth orbit. Only rockets can go fast enough.
We knew nothing about rocketry, we knew nothing about spacecraft, we knew nothing about orbits.
I saw a lot of rockets launched. I'd say that somewhere between 30 and 40% of them failed. A lot of them came up off the pad and went the opposite direction. Some of them got halfway off the pad and blew up. Some of them got to 10,000 feet and turned the other way and blew up.
The whole thing crumbled and blew up. It looked like an atomic bomb went off almost over our heads.
We got a big kick out of watching the Mercury astronauts. It was great looking at their eyes.
We're looking at this thing and looking at each other and deciding we want to go back and talk to the engineers a little more before we go further.
So this is what I love so much. It actually reminds me of this image here. That, you know, you have this idea that exploring space is all about rocket scientists. And actually, it was a bunch of people kind of like us who were figuring out how to explore space. And that's what I found to be so amazing, learning about the early days of NASA. And I think this is something we've kind of forgotten. We do kind of view these people as rocket scientists, as people who know exactly what they're doing. But the reality is that a lot of the heroes of science over the time have been considered amateurs. Charles Darwin was primarily self-funded, and Thomas Edison was primarily uneducated. He was homeschooled, and a lot of the experiments that he did were during his night job when he got bored. And so thankfully, we still have a lot of amateurs who are running around doing science still today. One of which that I find really interesting is Spacex, who's a well-known space exploration company in the United States by Elon Musk. And Elon Musk, who co-founded PayPal, came out of PayPal and he said, you know, he wanted to build a space exploration company. He wanted to build rockets that would hopefully one day take people into space. And so he poured all of his money and all of his time into building a rocket. And he built this rocket and he sent it up and it completely failed. It was a complete failure. And so, you know, he didn't want to let that get him down. And so he poured a lot more money and a lot more time into a second rocket. And that also completely failed. Complete failure. And so third time's the charm. He spent a lot of time doing a third rocket launch, sent that up. That also completely failed. It wasn't actually until his fourth rocket launch that he even had a successful rocket launch at all. And so while a lot of people find SpaceX to be interesting because of how successful they are, I actually find them to be interesting because of their failures and because it's proof that still today people are figuring out how to do space exploration, that no one's really this so-called rocket scientist that knows everything. And so to me, what I really love about all of this in space exploration is really the exploration of the unknown. And this is something that space exploration definitely does. And this is something that science fiction has been really good at. Science fiction has been great at kind of creating concepts for future things before anyone really knows much about them. Arthur C. Clarke famously wrote about satellites before they existed. And science fiction in general just is great at this. But I think it's now time for hacking to kind of be the new science fiction in a sense, in the way that you can sort of hack together new concepts before they actually exist and sort of explore the unknown through hacking rather than just through science fiction now. And so, born out of this love of exploring the unknown came an event called Science Hack Day. And Science Hack Day is a 48-hour event in which scientists, designers, developers, and all different types of people come together in the same physical space to see what they can rapidly prototype with science in 24 consecutive hours. And this is an image from the event in San Francisco. And it's just an amazing event. It's really just around getting excited and making things with science. You can build something silly, you can build something serious. Doesn't really matter. It's just about, kind of messing around and making stuff and having fun and experimenting. And hackathons, as you all know, have become something that's fairly ubiquitous, something that happens all the time. And while a lot of them are great, some of the hackathons that are happening around the world today look something more like this to me. A lot of hackathons have become more commercial, and they do focus a lot on the output, on the startups that come out of them, on the products that come out of them. And while that's all great, it kind of looks like an assembly line to me. It kind of misses the point of what's so great about hacking. It's really just around playing around. It's really just about playing around and experimenting with things and not really caring where it goes. And I think that's something that a lot of hackathons have sort of missed the point of, that it's really just around playing and not having any idea of what you're doing necessarily and just having fun. And so it reminds me of this quote that at the heart of anything good, there should be a kernel of something undefinable. And if you can define it or claim to be able to define it, then in a sense, you've missed the point. So it's really just around all this undefinable, unknown stuff in a sense. So some of the almost undefinable and unknown weird things that have come out of Science Hack Days have been things like this. This is essentially what you're looking at is a typeface that someone wanted to create in which all of the letters of the typeface would have equal wind drag. So what you're actually looking at here is a makeshift wind tunnel, and someone actually recorded the wind drag of each individual letter and then weighted each individual letter so that all the letters had equal wind drag. So if you need a typeface in which all of the letters have equal wind drag, it looks something like this. I have no idea what this is good for or how it's going to change the world or what it means. But this was a physicist who was playing with typography at a Science Hack Day, so it was kind of, I thought it was kind of awesome. Another example is this hack, which was called the Dia Knackery. Essentially, this was a cocktail of extracted strawberry DNA. Extracting DNA is something that you can do fairly simply with some household sort of materials, but sometimes it requires materials that aren't edible. So someone wanted to make a cocktail of completely edible materials that would have extracted strawberry DNA in it. So what you're actually seeing here is the long polymers of DNA clumping together as they're extracting the DNA in this cocktail. This recipe is up on Instructables in case you want to try it, but I warn you, it tastes disgusting. It's not good at all. But you can try it if you want to impress your friends. This was a hack that I concepted and had a friend help me build. This was a concept for a lamp that would light up every time an asteroid passed by the Earth. So you had sort of a near-death lamp, so to speak. So asteroids pass by the Earth fairly often, and so this light would alert you, and you could like dive under your desk and freak out all of your coworkers or something. It was a fun idea. I'm pretty sure we can probably figure out how to hack this together over this week. Not shipping it just yet, but maybe one day. Another cool hack made by people were at a Science Hack Day was a group of hackers wanted to simulate what it was like to experience synesthesia. And synesthesia is essentially something where the wires between your different senses get crossed. So some people with synesthesia will report associating certain colors with certain letters, or if they hear a loud sound, they might actually see a ripple across their vision. There's actually a bunch of different types of synesthesia. So this group of hackers wanted to simulate what it was like to experience this, and so they created a really, really creepy hack called Synesthesia. this is actually a mask that simulates synesthesia, a really creepy mask at that. And how they built this is essentially they took a bunch of vibrating speakers and they attached it to someone's face. And they attached all these vibrating speakers to someone's face. And because it was a hack day and they only had 24 hours to really build this, supposedly the only open pattern for a mask that they could find was one for a GIMP mask, which is kind of adds the creepy factor to it. So they stayed up all night, sewed together this mask, sewed in all the vibrating speakers, and then they wired it all up to an Arduino and a webcam. So as you navigate different parts of a room, and different parts of the room are lighter or darker, different parts of your face start vibrating. So in this sense, you can begin to feel sight in a weird way. So I thought this was amazing. I woke up to it the next morning at the Science Hack Day and was very creeped out by it. But I really like all these hacks that really explore the idea of what's visible and what's invisible. And this is because 95% of everything in our entire universe is invisible. And when I say 95% of absolutely everything is invisible, it really is absolutely everything. This is a pie chart of the entire energy and matter of our universe. And as you can see, 74% is dark energy, about 22% is dark matter, and the rest, less than 5%, is everything visible in our universe. In fact, if you take out intergalactic gas, less than 0.5% is actually everything visible in our universe. So this is every planet you could ever see, every star you could ever see, everything you could ever see, with the exception of intergalactic gas, makes up less than 0.5% of the universe. So we are very much the etc. in the universe, in a sense. But all the invisible stuff is really fascinating to me to sort of look at. Dark matter is essentially the stuff where, when we look into galaxies and we see that they're held together, there's not actually enough mass to account for enough gravity to explain how these galaxies are all held together. So we give this sort of invisible mass a placeholder name of dark matter. And dark matter is essentially this stuff that globs around galaxies. It's not uniform. There's actually these globs of dark matter around galaxies. And we think that maybe it's some weakly interacting particles that sort of help pull us all together and push us closer and closer and help keep us all together. So to me, in a lot of ways, this is a very friendly universe. We have all these weakly interacting particles that are helping keep us close and keep us all together. But there's also an opposite side to the universe, and that's dark energy. When we look into the universe and we see that it's expanding, we actually see that it's expanding much faster than we think it should be. And so this gets the placeholder name of dark energy, and it's actually pushing galaxies further and further apart from one another. So 95% of everything is invisible. But despite this, we still have an optical overdose problem in our culture. We often think that if you need more information, we'll simply just give you more screens until it looks something like this. This isn't a picture from a movie. This is actually a picture from the Large Hadron Collider, the particle accelerator at CERN. And particle accelerators do deal with a lot of information. They're essentially these massive space-time smashers that take subatomic particles and collide them into other subatomic particles at very high speeds. And when these subatomic particles collide, for a moment they turn into energy, and then they turn back into subatomic particles. The difference being is that when they turn back into subatomic particles, sometimes they turn into really weird ones that you might only see in the beginning of the Big Bang or in a supernova very far out in space. So these massive space-time smashers are essentially creating the conditions of the Big Bang and of different events in outer space here on Earth, which is pretty amazing. They are also, though, just very expensive machines for scientists to take pretty pictures with. These pictures look something like this. I'm not a particle physicist, so I can't begin to explain everything in this image, but I've been told that the 4 green lines and the 4 red towers represent 4 high-energy electrons. And so these are a lot of the visualizations of these subatomic particle collisions that scientists will look at. But a group at a Science Hack Day wanted to sort of play around with, what if instead of seeing what a subatomic particle collision looks like, what if you could actually hear what one sounds like? So a group created a really cool hack called the particle wind chime, and it essentially took this subatomic particle collision data and mapped it to sounds. So if you could imagine what a particle collision might sound like, that's what they were actually able to create. And the cool thing about this was not only did you have this sort of symphony of subatomic particle collisions playing, but it's also now being looked at as sort of a augmented diagnostic tool for particle accelerator laboratories. And this is because if you can imagine being at CERN, at the Large Hadron Collider, which would be really cool, but if you can imagine being there surrounded by tons of screens, and all these screens are telling you how the accelerator is doing. But in addition to that, you could get used to how the accelerator sounds, and you could get used to if something sounds a bit off. That's what the particle wind chime is now being looked into as. So it's kind of a cool application of it. But despite being the etc. in the universe, us as all of these visible sort of particles of the universe, there's actually a lot of interesting things to also do in the visible spectrum. One of which is to actually search for extraterrestrials. The SETI Institute, which is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute, has historically looked at radio waves as a way of detecting intelligent civilizations, thinking that an intelligent civilization might be able to create a radio transmitter of sorts, and so that's how we would maybe detect them. And while they're still looking at radio waves, they're now actually turning their sights to sight. They're now actually wanting to look into the universe for pulses of light that could only exist by an intelligent civilization creating it. So not things created by nature, but pulses of light that would be very specific to an intelligent civilization. So it's kind of a cool way of actually thinking about detecting extraterrestrial intelligence if we can, using sight instead of just radio waves. Another cool way that we're using the visible spectrum is through searching for exoplanets. And exoplanets just stands for extrasolar planets, or planets around other stars. And we've discovered hundreds and hundreds of these exoplanets so far, but in our galaxy alone, there's around 160 billion or so. So there's a lot left to be discovered. But the way exoplanets have been discovered lately has been through NASA's Kepler Telescope. And what NASA's Kepler Telescope does is it essentially looks at starlight very, very closely. And it pays such close attention to this starlight that it can detect any small dips in brightness in it. And if it detects a small dip in brightness in starlight, what it might actually be witnessing is an exoplanet passing in front of its star. And so if an Earth-sized planet passes in front of a star, the brightness might only dip down by 1/10,000th or so, a very small amount. But this telescope can detect that dip in brightness and can tell us if we're looking at an exoplanet or not, which is pretty cool. And so NASA has a bunch of machines and algorithms to sort of automatically tell us if we're looking at an exoplanet or not. And while that's great, and it has discovered a lot of planets, humans are still better at pattern detection than computers are. So with that in mind came a project called Planet Hunters. And Planet Hunters, which I believe is at planethunters.org, is a project in which it makes all of this NASA Kepler data available to anyone to look at, and actually bets that humans can probably find some exoplanets that NASA otherwise would have left behind, would have not detected. And so you can actually look at this light curve data and see if you can see any small dips in brightness. And if you see any small dips in brightness in this data, you might well be on your way to discovering an exoplanet. And actually, through Planet Hunters, a number of people have discovered exoplanets so far, which is pretty awesome. And the awesome part of this is that if you discover an exoplanet, your name goes on that scientific paper. So you're not doing some work for some scientist who's going to take the credit for you. The work you do on Planet Hunters actually gets credited to you. So you might actually be able to discover a planet we've never discovered before in our galaxy, which is pretty awesome if you ask me. There's a lot of projects like Planet Hunters where you can discover galaxies, planets, a bunch of different things on a website called spacehack.org. And spacehack.org is a directory of ways to participate in space exploration. It's something that I sort of hacked together in a couple weeks after I had left NASA. So a lot of more awesome projects like Planet Hunters is at this website in case you're interested. Closer to home, there are some planets that are fairly popular as well. This is a great image of Mars. And Mars is a planet that has gained a lot of popularity recently, not only with the Mars Curiosity landing last year, but also with a lot of people talking about sending humans to Mars now, which is pretty exciting to think about if that could happen in our lifetime. And a lot of people are planning that it will. Here in Germany, you actually have a really great resource that's adjacent to you. There's a great organization called the Austrian Space Forum. And if you haven't heard of them, I definitely recommend that you look them up. Essentially, the Austrian Space Forum is an organization of people from all different types of backgrounds who want to actually simulate what it's like to travel to Mars here on Earth. And by doing that, they're creating research that's actually really invaluable for anyone who wants to eventually go to Mars, because they're studying how to best design spacesuits, new rovers that we could be using, the psychology of what it's like to actually be on Mars, etc. And they really need help from all different types of people to really make this research great. And so the Austrian Space Forum is just a great organization that anyone can get involved in. They do a lot of really cool things. This was, I think, they were exploring an ice cave in Austria, which looks awesome. They were kind of looking for microbes that might be in the ice cave, thinking that when we explore Mars, if we were to find any life there, it might be in the form of microbes that are embedded in ice. So a lot of this work is really around figuring out how we best as humans could maybe one day colonize Mars. But before we send any humans there, a more likely candidate to colonize Mars might be something like this, something a lot more simple. And this is actually an image of lichen. And lichen is actually a fascinating organism because it was one of the first things that really helped colonize the Earth a long time ago. And this is because lichen helps break down bare rock surfaces to sort of give a foothold for future life forms to take place. And we've actually been able to test lichen and simulate Mars-like environments for lichen and been able to determine that lichen could actually survive on the surface of Mars. So it's actually kind of cool to think about something that helped colonize the Earth a long time ago might be one of the things that we use to sort of help colonize Mars in the future. In the meantime, though, the only colonizers of Mars are going to be robots like this one. This is an outline of the Mars Curiosity robot compared to the size of a man. I thought this was a really strange image because it looks like that robot wants to murder the man. It's a very evil robot, I think. So a lot of these sort of things that we will be sending to Mars in the meantime are robots. And here in Germany, you have a bunch of cool robots already. Maybe not ones going to Mars, but ones going to the moon. You have adorable German robots here. A lot of you, I'm sure, are familiar. The Google Lunar Xprize has a team in Berlin called the Part-Time Scientists, and they build these adorable robots that might one day explore the lunar surface, which is great. And the Google Lunar Xprize is a $30 million competition to sort of build a robot and send it to the moon. And while it's a really exciting competition and people hope to be sending these robots to the moon within the next couple of years or so, unfortunately, the competition is closed to any new teams. But there are other projects you can get involved with, projects like the University Rover Challenge. And the University Rover Challenge tasks universities from around the world to try building the next generation of Mars rovers. And this is just a great program because if you come up with something that's actually really unique, you have access to people at NASA, to people at different space agencies who might actually incorporate your technology into the next generation Mars rover. So it's a pretty cool competition to think about. And I think it actually outlines an interesting area where I think more people should be involved in building new ways to sort of do Mars rovers, because sometimes they have some problems, like this one. This was one of the university rovers. And I think rovers could be sort of imagined in a much more creative way instead of sort of building them like cars in a sense. To me, some of the most interesting concepts for rovers have been ones that have come from unexpected sources in a sense. my favorite Mars rover prototype was built around this concept of a tumbleweed. And so someone imagined, what if the way a tumbleweed goes across the surface of the Earth, what if we could have a rover go across the surface of Mars, much like a tumbleweed does? So it was really interesting, and it's something that actually people at NASA for the last 10 years or so have been prototyping, sort of these concepts for Martian rovers that instead of acting like cars would actually just tumble across the Martian surface, which is really great. And so sort of with this whole idea of exploring the unknown and sort of mashing things together in unexpected ways, it reminds me of my most favorite story from a science hack day. And this was of a hack called a Beard Detector. Someone at a science hack day wanted to create a device that would essentially detect when he needed to shave. I don't know why, so don't ask me why, but he was very particular about shaving. And so this hacker hacked together this USB microscope, like you can see here. And he took this USB microscope and he held it up to his face, and he got some really gross images of the stubble on his face. It was kind of gross. But he wrote some basic code and used an open computer vision library and was able to actually, determine the lines around his face. So this is an image of the Beard Detector in action. As you can see, it's saying no beard found, and then, it's drawing lines around the stubble on his face and telling him when he needs to shave. So when I first saw this, I thought to myself, that's cool, I guess. I'm not really sure what it has to do with science at all. But, as I said, with Science Hack Day, people can build whatever they want. But sitting in the audience and seeing this hack demoed was a particle physicist. And when this particle physicist saw this hack demoed, he said to himself, wow, that's actually a genius way for how to detect cosmic rays in a cloud chamber. Which sounds ridiculous until you actually see what cosmic rays in a cloud chamber looks like. And so after Science Hack Day, this particle physicist wrote up this entire proposal for how to detect cosmic rays in a cloud chamber using the original code and open computer vision library someone had used to detect if he needed to shave or not. And to me, this is just what I love so much about hacking and hack days. It's really just around creating sparks for future ideas and future collaborations and just mashing things up and seeing where they go. And so Science Hack Days have been all around the world. They're sort of events that no one owns it. It's not an organization. There's open source instructions for how to organize one at sciencehackday.com. And we've just seen the event just grow. This was an image from Science Hack Day in Chicago where we got to hack a planetarium, which was pretty cool. This here was an image from Science Hack Day in Kenya where people made a lot of robotics hacks, which was a lot of fun. And I wanted to ask all of you here if maybe collectively, somehow, we could create a Science Hack Day in Berlin, because there is such an awesome community here. All of you here, all of the hacker spaces here, the artists, the designers, the scientists, there should already be a Science Hack Day in Berlin. So if all of us together could maybe collectively make that happen, and I'm happy to help you as much as I can, create a Science Hack Day in Berlin, I think that would be really awesome. And I have no doubt you guys would create some of the most awesome hacks we've ever seen. So to me, when I'm thinking about science and space exploration and what we could be searching for, we could be searching for extraterrestrials or exoplanets, a lot of different things. But to me, it's really the search for experimentation that's so incredibly precious. And I think we've found it through hacking science and hacking space exploration. Thank you.